Okay, guys, well, this should be interesting. This is the Charterhouse. If you look at this diorama, you can see it's a very complicated layout of rooms and corridors and this, that, and the other. And that's one of the reasons I chose to take a guide, or be guided, I should say. So let's get this puppy rolling, and I'll explain the rest as we go. So this is the Charterhouse Square. Dates back quite a while. Even though we think of the rivers being very close, Queen Elizabeth would often stop here for dinner or a rest on her way back into town, if you will, from one of her progresses, so-called trips around the country. But it's only like, half a mile to the Westminster Whitehall Palace, wherever she was staying. Well, I better go find out where the tour's starting from. I have an idea it's not right here.
The cat flap with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
She'd like to do another one.
Yeah.
So happy with that.
Always loved this pattern on the walls. It's kind of cool. That's neat looking up there. Hi, I'm here for a tour that starts at 11. Where should I be?
Next gate. Please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, I suspected as much.
It's in the museum, is it?
I don't know.
Oh,
Never been here, but I'm going to find out. Yep, looking forward to it. I'm sure by now you guys are probably used to me being lost and turning the wrong way. This one is kind of explainable. Uber, being an American company, is discouraged by the powers that be, i.e. black cab concerns in the city of London, that they don't want the Uber cabs going on certain streets to certain locations so as to make it a little easier run for the black cabs. But where they dropped me, in this particular case, my Uber dropped me way across this park and not where I wanted to go, even though that was as close as he could get. So I took off. I saw the giant doors from across through the trees on the other side of the park and thought that must be the entrance. So I went on my right hand around this kind of circular loop and saw that diorama, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I think I'll stop there and take a few pictures and figure out what's going on. There was no smell from what I thought was rosemary, by the way, there. And bingo bango, I got it wrong because I was encouraged to get it wrong. But here we go, back inside and starting our journey, hopefully.
Hello everyone. Luckily we're going to start in the glorious sunshine. Hope that's amenable to everyone. Please do follow me. Hello and welcome to the Charterhouse. My name is Alex. I'll be your tour guide today. I used to be one of the gardeners here for years, so I know a little bit more about the outside, but it's fine. I know plenty about the inside now too. This is Sandra who will be joining us, one of our volunteers here at the Charterhouse. She's, I'm sure, as knowledgeable as me, will correct me wrong, but also will make sure we don't get lost in the labyrinthine corridors that we will be in later. We start out here because out here pertains to the history before there were buildings and the Charterhouse here. I'll give you a speedy little bullet point of the main points of the history so we have context of what we're walking around, because there's no real chronological way of exploring the buildings, so we'll just have to pick and mix a little bit, and then we'll go inside. So we cast our mind's eye back to the 1300s, the early 1300s, and all this here be fields, woodland, land holding, etc. There was a bit of land called Spittlecroft outside the City of London walls, over there, city not here, owned by St Bartholomew's Church. And so it was until 1348, when the Black Death, bubonic plague spread through Europe, through England and UK, and through London. It was known colloquially at the time as the pestilence, or the great mortality, because the death rate was huge. We reckon about 30 to 50% death rate. And as a result, all the graveyards in the City of London were getting overflowing, basically. It was terrible. So they needed somewhere to lay their to rest. A knight of the court of King Edward III, so Walter Manny, he'd been a sort of fighting warrior kind of knight of the court, various wars, and he leased this land to be one of two large burial sites outside the city. This one was called West Smithfield, and the other one, East Smithfield, was over by Tower of London. We had some excavations, and that was roughly where the square behind you was, and kind of going under some of the buildings beyond it. We didn't really know how many dead were here. We had one inscription from years ago that said 50,000. Modern estimates are much more reduced anywhere between 5 and 20,000. A lot of excavation was done when the Elizabeth line was being built, and they found, unexpectedly, they thought maybe people were just being, mass graves poured in, overwhelming, and actually they'd taken great care. They laid them in rows so that you could walk between with their feet pointing east in the Christian tradition. That said, there were layers of bodies because there were multiple outbreaks actually of the plague over several years. They found that inert traces of the bacteria and sent it off to be sequenced, and they found that bubonic plague has changed very little since those times. These days it still crops up and can be fatal, but it's very treatable with antibiotics. So, as a result of that, the three sort of chapters of history begin here. Sir Walter Manny, who is, by the way, buried behind me under this white stone. We didn't know that until some excavations were done in this area, and we found his grave, and when this area was landscaped, we put a commemoration to him there. It's there outside the building because the original chapel, which I'll talk about, some of these gravel kind of lines actually denote some of the original shape of the chapel that was. And that chapel was part of a Carthusian monastery, Carthusian monks, which Sir Walter Manny had come and established their monastery here at the site in 1371. And the monks were here in this grand monastery outside the city of London, big landmark in the area, about 160 years until Henry VIII's dissolution of monasteries in the 1530s. Then it was made into a grand Tudor manor by Duke of Norfolk, owned by a few other people, including more importantly Duke of Norfolk, Howard. We'll hear about both of those then later. That was about 60 years until it was sold, most importantly for us, to a very rich man called Thomas Sutton, not Sir Thomas Sutton, because he was a very rich, low-born man, right at the end of his life, and he bequeathed it and a lot of his wealth to be a charity in the form of a school for poor boys and an almshouse, an assisted place of living for poor old men, or specifically, first, poor, aged, maimed, needy, or impotent people, which was slightly revised to be either decrepit or old captains, either at sea or land, soldiers maimed or impotent, merchants fallen on hard times or held prisoner by the Turks. The school remained here until the 1870s, then moved out to Godalming in Surrey, where it's now quite a prestigious boarding school, and we have a sort of symbolic relationship with them, although part of Thomas Sutton's bequeathment still goes to bursary places at the school. But to this day, it is still a functioning almshouse. To come and live here, people need to be over 60, in social, financial, and housing need, single insofar as they're not coming with a partner to live here, and whilst they might stay here to the end of their lives and begin to receive care on site, at the time they need to be sort of able to live independently, whatever that means for them, and also willing to be part of community, as part of community. We'll hear details of all of those different parts when we go inside, which we're about to do. Just to note a few bits, it's a place of residence, so this is people's home. That's fine, we're allowed to walk around, we do it all the time. Feel free to take photos of things, but not people, unless someone said, please take a photo of me. And it's an old place with some uneven surfaces, particularly outside, where we'll be nipping out again later on the cobbles, so everyone manage themselves and let us know if there's an issue and just take care, okay? Let's go inside the Charterhouse. So welcome inside the Charterhouse. This aptly name is the Great Hall, and very great it is too. We've got chandeliers, wood paneling, huge ceiling, beautiful glass windows, light streaming in, etc. This is, in today's context, the heart of the community. I missed a point earlier. The people living as members of the almshouse from the creation of the Charterhouse were called brothers, not because it's a religious order and they're monks, possibly because there used to be a monastery here as a nod to that, or as just a sort of, familial term time. only had male residents until 2017. We've now got some female residents. And the first female brother was asked, what do you want to be called? He said, a brother. So that's what we start with, and we might find something better. We'll see. So the brothers come here, they have communal meals 3 times a day, notably lunch. The bell is rung at 1, and there's a formal introduction by the master or the preacher, and they all sit down together. It's not compulsory, but many of them do, so there's a community feel to it all, and so really where they all come together. That said, the reason this space is as it is, when chapter 2, the Charterhouse was converted into a Tudor manor, so Edward North laid this sort of shape roughly, and then the 4th Duke of Norfolk, Howard, cousin of the Queen, did it up quite a lot, including this fantastic wooden screen there with lots of detailing, etc. Sandra, do you know it's got his initials somewhere on it, doesn't it? Anyway, somewhere. And this, amazingly, there was a fire in World War II, in 1941, which took out a lot of the Charterhouse's roof and a lot of the central section, including a lot of this room, lovely restored by some architects called Seeley and Paget, including that screen. And quite impressively, you can't really tell which bits are old and which bits are new, and so it's a really good job. Then we have rather a big feature, this chimney piece, this fireplace. So, as I said, the almshouse school here was founded by a man called Sir Thomas Sutton, and this was created in sort of honour of him. See the cannon and barrels there on the top? That is because he was made the Master of Ordnance in the northern parts when under Elizabeth I, supplying her armies and their garrisons and equipping fortifications, etc. And the title came of some land, lucky for him. Came to the rights to some land at Gateshead near Newcastle, or opposite Newcastle on the Tyne River, and that gave him a monopoly on some coal mines in County Durham, as well as a river to put his boats of coal on to trading. So he started to make quite a bit of wealth. Usury, money lending had been made legal in the 1570s, so he started to do just that, lending out money at 10% interest. Over years, he became known as the wealthiest commoner in England by his friends or enemies or frenemies. I'm not quite sure who was using that. One of his visitors to his business accommodation down in Fleet Street remarked that he had a great iron chest full of gold on the first floor that he was worried would fall through the floorboards, it looked so heavy. He lent a huge amount of money in the last 16 years of his life, £220,000, a huge sum at the time, 37,000 in 1604 alone. And he also sometimes took land in lieu of payment, and he may well be how he partly acquired this from the Howard family, although the nobles had owned it before him. So he purchased it in 1611 for £13,000. He had no heirs, he was getting older in life, and he wanted to do something good with his money. So he bequeathed the estate, £50,000 in his will. He got an Act of Parliament signed to make sure that the Charterhouse was an independent corporation, and he laid down how he wanted it to be run. He wanted there to be 16 governors which oversaw everything, and the staff run by the Master of the Charterhouse, a title we still use today, although in modern context, head of the community, CEO of a charity. He never saw his efforts realised, as he died in December of 1611, so it was up to his governors to make it all happen with this Act of Parliament and the money he left. Like I say, he was not Sir Thomas Sutton, he was just Thomas Sutton. He didn't have a coat of arms, which was rather a sort of, point of favour at that time. So his governors wanted to get him one. So they went down to the heraldry offices, and the girls looked through the books and went, "Oh, some Suttons in Lincolnshire died out not long ago. You can buy that one." So that is his posthumous coat of arms, which he never really knew himself in life. Little dog at the top. bit of dispute. It might just be a greyhound, or it might be a talbot. Now, a distinct breed of hunting dogs, all known for their loyalty. And you'll see little dogs here and there around the Charterhouse. They pop up and hide and peek over at us. That behind me in this portrait is Thomas Sutton. That portrait was commissioned up to his death by some of the governors at the time. You can see him with a scroll in his hand. That's his deed of gift for the church. Bearing in mind this is a time of Protestantism, post-Catholicism and abolition, and this site had been a Catholic monastery, we think there was an aspect of promoting Thomas Sutton so much after his death because he was a symbol of Protestant charity, which is a sort of value at that time. Like I said, this has been consistently used since the brothers moved in 1614, and the schoolboys at the time, as a centre of the community. The only interruption with that was, as I said, the war, the fire, the destruction of the roof. So the brothers were moved out to the school where it then was in Surrey, and they remained there until it was reopened by King Henry VIII in 1958, and they've been back here since. We will now move backwards in time briefly by going to part of the Charterhouse most affiliated with the monastery. Yes, please. Sorry, I should have said that. Currently about 40-45 spaces. We're trying to make a bit more accommodation in place up on that later. Originally, I think there were 80, and it was a bit of a shame. Before they went away during the war, there was 54 or something. They weren't really taking in new brothers, so after having new house elsewhere, so in that third or so slowly creep back up.
Probably quite a sought after place.
Yes, I think sadly a few people don't know about it. We try to tell people about it. But then we have five spaces and 4 years. But yes, I thought so. If you'd like to follow me.
Everybody who wants to get in.
Well, I'm not surprised.
You see that? People who think that they're interested in our school, I'd be surprised if they need to know.
Turn around and say, I'm current work.
No, I think there has been once in history. I've been there, yes. You saw it,
Right, let's nod to where we're going through. We'll only pass through here, but this room we call the Old Library. It used to be the monks' refectory where they ate, and then was where the schoolboys were eating, whilst the brothers were in there, and now it's just one of the areas the brothers can hang out, essentially. But we'll be going down the steps, do mind the steps, into this corridor.
And you've got over 5'5" mind your head.
I am.
Alex is going to mind, but anybody else?
So you're okay?
I'm all right. So some of us are okay.
You all go ahead.
Are you happy to just stay here?
I'll be down.
Are you going to, right,
Yeah.
we'll go first and then give you your time and space to get down.
However considerate, you still feel the pressure of the crowd behind you. So
Thank you.
rather than
Yeah, it's better that you do it in your own time.
exactly. I always think about how hilarious it is that handrails weren't considered.
Well, I'm afraid in 1348 and 1351 there wasn't much thought when
Nope.
I'll put it.
Nope.
There are some benches if you want to sit down.
Uh-huh.
Strange considering it was particularly remade as a place for old people. Yes, welcome to this lovely and strange, echoing, quiet and cool corridor. This includes stonework that's some of the oldest on site because it was part of the Carthusian monastery built here from 1371 as Walter Manny designed. Let's say Carthusian monastery. The Carthusians were founded by St. Bruno, a monk who, in his previous order, found it with it too chatty, a bit too busy, and he wanted something much more aesthetic, silent, contemplation, no worldly goods, etc. So him and 6 followers in the 11th century wandered into the Charterhous mountains in France, near the edge of Switzerland, and near Lyon, to found his order. Note I say Chartreuse. When 9 Carthusian monasteries were established in the UK, you could say Chartreuse apparently, so it got made into Charterhouse, and there were 9 Charterhouses in England, with this one being the preeminent one at the time. The buildings were randomly made by the King's mason at the time, Henry VIII, who also was responsible for the nave and Canterbury Cathedral and Westminster Hall. So, a bit of clout behind the person building this, clearly a big deal. So this cloister would have, for one, this line would have extended possibly twice as long. That's why we've got the mirrors at the end to sort of give a bit of reflection and a bit of sense of, if it continued, how big it would be. And also, we won't be going out there, but there's a sort of square up here with some new buildings of Queen Mary University Hospital. But originally the cloister would have continued on 3 sides of the building, so really quite big space. And off each of these sites would have been 5 to 7 cell houses for the 25 Carthusian monks. Cells, a little bit of a misnomer, and they were quite nice little two-story private little dwellings with a private garden out the back, thank you very much. And they also had, amazingly, in the 1400s, running water. They had a water tower with runnels that served the back of each of their residences, so all mod cons, thank you. And they, as I said, quite an ascetic order, weren't allowed to work, weren't allowed to have possessions, mainly wanted to spend time in silent contemplation, usually weren't allowed to talk to each other, apart from on Sundays and feast days when they have communal services or go to the Charterhous, part of the monastery where they talk, and talk through affairs. But most of the time, they would be in their cells. So this doorway, this little hatch here, is the last surviving original doorway, with cell B. And you'll notice this strange kind of pass-through opening. Like I say, they were in silent contemplation. They did not want to be disturbed or interact with the outside world. So they were served by lay brothers who would cook their meals and all things. And I presume meals and possibly books and possibly occasionally a chamber pot would be passed through this opening, so they could sort of as a meal and sneak it and eat it and leave the plate afterwards and not be disturbed from their prayer. That one wasn't originally there, we know from some archaeological checks, so it's clearly been repurposed from elsewhere on site. We'll hear some more about the monks later. They were here for about 160 years and it became quite a prominent landmark in the area, a place of religious learning and worship, and was, on many people's passage in and out of the city of London. There it was, squat upon the land. Then, as I said, it was a mansion, and that has a bit of importance here, because this sort of red brickwork was where Thomas Howard, the 4th Duke of Norfolk, I'm going to say on the house arrest, did some home renovations, and he made this into the covered walkway down to his tennis court down at the far end. So that was his way, and also doors would go in and out of the gardens for leisure. A Tudor, very rare example actually, a Tudor, it's called a Tudor garden gallery. And it also amazingly has some importance for when the school was here, because schoolboys had this sort of square outside for athletics and cricket. Their main schoolhouse and accommodation was in what had been the tennis court down the end. But in here, they played football. So they play it up and down here, and actually Charterhouse football players have some important creation of the game football in its own way. because this space was very long and it had these little archways and windows and things, if the ball went out into the square, that was really awkward to try and go and get it and pick it back in. So they would send out the wheeliest boy, and he'd go and pick it up and throw it in, hence the throw-in. We don't know if they created the offside rule by themselves, but we know they had one because it's written down in some records we found, and because the space is really long, and it'd be really easy for your mate to stand near the goal down the far end, bounce it all the way down to him, and then you just knock it in. So they had to have a rule that says you're not allowed to do that. And the Charterhous football team and the old Carthusian football team, which is ex-pupils, attended the first meeting of the Football Association in 1863, where all these teams that were made of schools and local clubs and whatever, they'd all been making up their own rules as they go along for their patch, wanted to play together, so they had to argue about the rules, and they wrote it all down in the official rules for the Football Association. And the old Carthusians won the FA Cup in 1881, and they were one of the last amateur teams to do so. The old Italians were the last. The school, yes, the school had some quite prominent alumni over the years. They had John Wesley, who founded Methodism, Roger Williams, who founded the Rhode Island Colony in America, the novelist William Makepeace Thackeray, and Robert Baden-Powell, who founded the Scouts. So yeah, some talents come out of the school. It was here until 1872, but by which time it had got quite a lot bigger, and it was also accepting fee-paying students. Quite the right fit, so it moved up, as I said, to Godalming in Surrey, where it still is a prestigious school to this day. We will now go through some outside courtyards. We'll be going back through them, so don't panic. You don't get a picture on the way first time, you get one the second way, to an outside space where I'll talk a little bit more about monks. What I mean.
Those are taller money.
The truth is, I wanted to see this place as much for the history and the loveliness of the building structure as for the fact that football, as it's called in this country, soccer in America, one of the principal rules of the way to play the game is the throw-in, because the boys that played up and down the aisle of the cloister, if it bounced out of the window, the younger kid had to go out there and throw it in. And throw in from the side, from touch, is the way you get a ball in football. But here, seeing where it was conceived and why it was conceived, I love. One of the residential brothers, one of the folks that live here, we were asked not to take pictures of him, and I didn't. I was just filming when I walked by, so I hope he wasn't put off by that. But we get some really good looks at some really interesting cut and dressed stone of so many different varieties. And I guess ages, times when it was done, something that exists since the 1300s is going to change in a lot of ways. And when you have as many wars as this area has suffered, things are going to be different. But I really like the way all of it looks. And here we come to the end with a little bit more to please your eye.